Got it. Thanks, y'all. Thank you, Zara, for opening up our space, giving us such a powerful land acknowledgement. Also, please let me know if my connection is okay, because West Philly, even though it's the best Philly, we sometimes be working and, getting a little bit iffy with our connection. Um, but I'm really grateful to be here with Zara and with everybody here. I've been doing restorative and transformative justice work in Boston, which is my hometown, in Cambridge, as well as here in Philly for the past few years. And so I've just been really, really grateful and really also excited to think about how we're doing this in our families. One of my first mentors was the one who told me, oh, okay, my video is a little laggy. I'm going to work on that. Let's see if we can. Thank you, Khalib. Uh, One of my mentors is really the first one who told me that restorative or transformative justice isn't something that you do until you do it at home, and that your family circle is the first circle you should ever hold. And so that was kind of my jumping off point of really wanting to learn more about how do we actually bring this to our home. And when I was thinking about these things, my family was and is going through a lot. And so I really wanted to think about how we embody those things. So I'm just really excited that I've gotten to explore that more with Zara. I've got to explore that more with others, and that we're exploring that here together. So with all of that, I'm just really excited for us to explore more about what it means for each of us to build circles that can help our families have the conversations. And thank you, Ebony, for the loving reminder to please mute your mic. We'll have that community agreement of the one mic rule as much as we can. And I'll pass it back to you, Zara.
Yes, hello. I think I already introduced myself in the beginning, but for those who have joined since then, I'm Zara Raven. I just use my name or Z instead of pronouns. I'm the coordinator of Queenie's Crew at Project Nia and a longtime organizer and educator around transformative justice, and just have been so excited to be learning alongside Queen. I've got to go to a 3-day training by Queen just this past summer on restorative justice at home. Transformative justice was something I had practiced more in community organizing spaces. And at home, I think I've used a lot of the lessons that I've learned from transformative justice in my parenting. But only recently did I start organizing circles with my village, with people at home. And then my child actually went to school and started organizing circles at school to deal with conflict. So it's been really exciting to practice close to home, at home.
So I think we wanted to explore a little bit more about what restorative and transformative justice was together. So we had some shared language of what these things were, how we understand them, and a kind of a jumping off point, right? I think these are two beautiful things about RJ or TJ is they aren't just one thing, and they really look so different. So we're going to kind of explore a little bit about how, we understand restorative and transformative justice, but by no means are these set clear definitions that should be only abided to in this way. So we can maybe move to the next slide. I think we had some slides actually about RJ. Okay, cool. So in the most basic terms, I think about restorative justice as really being committed to relationships and being committed to people. We're really, of course, when we're thinking about restorative justice, also really trying to reframe this idea of like crimes or these ideas of like punishments, and really trying to think about more things such as harms, what harm has been done to somebody, how has this affected somebody, and what unmet needs have happened that don't allow folks to actually resolve conflicts or move forward through conflicts. So restorative justice in a lot of ways is really trying to focus more on the people rather than the actual law or rule that is being broken, right? And so that is, of course, rooted in Native, Indigenous, and cultural practices of that community, whether that's Native American communities, Indigenous communities in Latin America, as well as communities in Pacific Island, on the continent of Africa, and restorative practices have so many different kinds of ways that they are explored. But I think what I really hope that folks really take from this explanation of restorative justice is that it really is centered on our cultural heritage and practices. And that when we're moving from that place in restorative justice, I've actually, in my experience, seen some of the most fruitful and transformative work because we're rooting it in the things that people are already passionate, connected to, and see themselves in. And so those are just some of the kind of like overarching points about restorative justice that I was hoping we could all have a shared understanding on, especially as we're thinking about how we bring them into our homes and our families. And I'll pass it to Zara to talk about TJ.
Yes, thank you. Before I actually even move to the next slide, I'd love to know what people in the room have heard about transformative justice. What do you already know? And you can respond in the chat. Transforming conditions. Yes, Rebecca, thank you. TJ is about creating a new world inside the shell of the old. How beautifully put. I really love that. And I think of it exactly that way. It's like, how do we build in our microcosm the world that we want to see, that we want to practice? Miriam said, it seeks to get at the root of the injustice in order to prevent it from happening again. Exactly. Transformative justice is about prevention. Safra said, we think a lot about healing justice being integrated. Absolutely. Marian shared, modeling the relationships we need to no longer practice capitalism and dominator. Dominator culture. And Aya said, acknowledging the value of every single person. So many wonderful responses. No one belongs citizens. I knew you all knew a lot. Thank you so much. You can keep sharing in the chat if you'd like to. I know we wanted to keep this limited to 90 minutes because we know folks have dinner plans and kids and actions to attend. So I will jump into some of the values that I associate with transformative justice. Something I learned from Miriam Kaba and Shira Hassan when I first started learning from them about this I think it was 2017 or 2016, is that transformative justice is the probiotic. So often in the criminal legal system, we're asked like, okay, who's going to be punished? How are we going to respond to this harm? But transformative justice and abolition are more about prevention. It's how do we actively create the conditions to promote generative responses to conflict and harm. So really similar to what Queen was saying about relationships and nurturing our relationships over time, really to prevent harm. Another value that I associate with transformative justice is that it's safety-driven rather than punishment-driven. It's also future-oriented rather than past-oriented. So again, it's not about what happened in the past, it's how do we prevent harm from happening in the future? How do we prevent harm? Healing over punishment, like Latanya said. Thank you all so much for sharing all of these beautiful responses. The last value I have on here is no one is disposable. So the definition of transformative justice that I use is it's any strategy that seeks to create more safety without relying on the state or carceral state mechanisms. And when I say carceral, I really mean the state. There are some people who will argue that cancel culture is not transformative or that it is carceral. I am not one of those people. I think that we have to have an analysis of power. So there's a difference between disposability culture, which is when people who have additional needs or experiences of oppression are pushed out of spaces. And I've seen that a lot in radical spaces, but also in homes with queer and trans and disabled youth being at higher risk of homelessness. So it's when people who are more marginalized or pushed out of spaces because we're not willing to meet their needs. That's disposability culture. That's what I oppose. Cancel culture, I associate that with, we're going to boycott. We're not buying J.K. Rowling's books. We're actually not going to allow people who are in positions of power to continue to hold those positions of power while they're perpetrating great harms. So I make a distinction there. Not everybody makes. And so, we will at the end share more resources so you can keep doing learning, because the reality is nobody thinks of transformative justice and restorative justice in the same ways. The other things I wanted to share about this is that transformative justice really built off of the lessons and the work of restorative justice practitioners, of Black and Indigenous folks who had been doing this for centuries. Prison abolitionist Ruth Morris is often credited with coining the term restorative justice or transformative justice. Sorry, I'm going to ask y'all to please mute your mics. We have so many people in here, which is amazing, that I want to make sure that we can all hear. So Ruth Morris, the prison abolitionist, is often credited with coining the term transformative justice. And the main reason is that prison abolitionists moved away from the term restorative justice when we saw it being co-opted in carceral institutions. We're seeing restorative justice used in prisons, which is not, I think, what many of our Black and Indigenous ancestors wanted, not what prison abolitionists want. So that's sort of the idea behind why we use a different word. We also wanted to talk about, let's see. Oh, and Marian shared, yes, boycotting, canceling is a tactic that makes sense in particular conditions, but we don't want to dispose of anyone in our communities. Exactly. And thank you for saying that. It's exactly why I make that distinction between disposing and canceling. And the conditions, the circumstances matter. Context matters, power matters. And this is also a perfect transition to when not to use RJ and TJ. So I'm sorry. So in practice, what is the difference between RJ and TJ? I'm wondering if we should respond to questions in the moment or take questions after we get through a few more slides.
Yeah, I'm kind of open to
yeah,
I'm open to answering questions now. I mean, if we're feeling like we're good on time.
I think we are. I think we're okay. So Zubaida, I'll respond to your question first, and then Queen, if you want to respond. I would say one of the differences is the specific practices. So I think of, with TJ, I think of accountability. God, I'm like blanking on accountability sessions, or like wow, why am I blanking on this? Queen, help me out.
Yeah, here I go. Of course, my mind blinks at the same time.
Justice,
but right. So I feel like the way I would really describe them, I do think there is more overlap than there is distinction. I will be pretty honest with that. But I do think for me, one of the main things that, as Zara was talking about, was that like accountability processes work, and that like really intentional like community accountability thinking. I also think the way that I understand transformative justice is also a lot of times in ways that maybe restorative justice doesn't always think about, including a much larger net of community. At least from my practice of using transformative justice, when I've done circles using more of a restorative justice model, it's like the people that are directly impacted in the harm coming together, where transformative justice might have the larger community, neighbors, other people, members of the family. Like it might have a larger network of people who need to support this accountability or this repair happening. So those are kind of at least very basic, but like I also know that for me, there's a lot more overlap than there is distinction. And like when we say we're using RJ or when we say we're using TJ.
Yeah, I really appreciate that point, Queen. I agree that there's a lot of overlap. They're both rooted in relationships. It is definitely a tough question, but I think the other thing is that I consider so many things TJ. I think giving childcare to friends, TJ, getting groceries for your friends who are struggling or sick, that's TJ work. So the everyday things, bystander intervention is TJ. So I define TJ very broadly, not just even the accountability process, not even just responding to harm, but what are the everyday ways that we create safety in our everyday lives?
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said too, Marian. Transformative justice extends to a broader analysis, wanting to transform the conditions and needs of harm possible. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are all such great points.
So to jump into when not to use RJ and TJ, and these are sort of our guidelines, but again, it's going to depend on you, your needs, your boundaries, your context. So something that I learned also from Miriam and Shira is when it's too soon after a severe incident of harm. So sometimes we really want resolution, and the state feeds us this lie that we can just call a 3-digit number and get resolution right here, right now, and there's going to be an immediate response. The reality is more complicated.
Here's some tea, but you need it to cool off, okay?
And I just want to remind folks again to please keep your mics on mute and use the chat to share comments and ask questions. But what I was going to share was just that sometimes we're hurt and we have to process our feelings and we have to get support first. It's okay to prioritize your healing over accountability. Of course, healing and accountability are overlapping. Both are non-linear processes. There is no end point, and justice and accountability can help in our healing. But there are also a lot of other things that we can do. Oh, wow. I did not know that. Thank you. I'm still learning so much about Zoom. and, and I will try to make sure to do that next time. Luke commented, I've heard TJ takes more into account oppressions and imbalanced power in doing the healing and accountability work, whereas watered down versions of RJ attempts to treat all parties as equal without addressing the reality of power dynamics. I appreciate that point. I think that it probably depends a lot on the practitioner, the people involved. And I think, again, it's sort of like restorative justice comes from practices from before, I think we've had to adapt to colonial times, to capitalism, to systems of oppression that many of our ancestors didn't have those dynamics that didn't exist in the same way. The other thing, so next, after it's too soon, sometimes there's too much water under the bridge. So it could be that too much has happened, too much harm has happened, and repair is just not possible, or that we're just not willing to engage in a relationship with someone after we've been hurt too much. So could be too soon, or maybe too much happened. Did you want to share any more about that, Queen?
Yeah, so I was also thinking about, especially when a harm, or even, like sometimes it's like also abuse, and we can name that too, has happened. And folks do not have, maybe there's been harm on both sides, or there's been some sort of like mutual hurt that's happened here. And I've also seen sometimes, and even in my own experience, of trying to convince people to re-care about each other, which of course is like an important thing for us to remind ourselves of empathy and the empathy we have for each other. But also, like, if there is kind of a lack of commitment for folks to rebuild the relationships, again, RJ and TJ are really based on consent and radical consent. So if those things aren't there, then we're not going to force people to be in spaces to repair relationships that they really don't feel like are supportive for them anymore. As much as, again, there might be different opinions in the community as facilitators, we again are always moving on that radical consent tip. So I also wanted to bring that into.
Yes, thank you for that. The next one on here, and Queen sort of touched on this too, is sometimes there's a significant power imbalance, and what's needed is polarization. So I've been involved in some organizing and solidarity with Palestine on my campus, and I'm someone who has Arab ancestry. Some of my Arab Lebanese ancestors moved to the Dominican Republic, migrated to the Dominican Republic, and I'm not someone who is really willing to engage in conversations with Zionists about whether Palestinians should be massacred. That's a boundary that I hold. And also, I'm in community with a lot of really wonderful anti-Zionist Jews who are engaging in those conversations. And I think it's so beautiful and so important for folks who are able to engage in those conversations. So sometimes it's knowing not all work is my work, and also that, yeah, there are other people who might be willing to take on this. So knowing your boundaries, knowing what are your hard lines in the sand, I would not generally recommend. And I think that sometimes, especially in organizing spaces and in our communities, during intimate partner abuse, ongoing intimate partner abuse, people have tried to, and I've personally tried to use transformative and restorative justice processes to respond to abuse that's ongoing. And I don't recommend it. I think it's really important to understand what the power dynamics are in a situation so that your process is not replicating those dynamics or allowing abuse to continue or oppressive behaviors to continue. So knowing when sometimes we need polarization, sometimes we need to organize, sometimes RJ and TJ is not the appropriate response to the situation. I'm going to try to catch up on the chat. Let's see, they're not at odds with each other, but state and police co-opted RJ does defacing RJ as part of radical anti-colonial, anti-capitalist movements because becoming used to increase power and community respect for police, legitimizing the police. Yes, absolutely, 1000%. This is exactly it, that it's been co-opted in some, and I've already even seen transformative justice being co-opted. I've seen abolition get co-opted. I've seen so many of the words that I have used get co-opted by other groups with people who have values that are so different from my own. So I don't think that we can just keep changing the language and, it'll always be co-opted. We just have to be clear about our values and our principles. And I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, because now we are running a little bit over time. Okay, wait. Oh, I'm going backwards. That's why. I was like, these are not. Okay, there we go. So how about we jump right into building a circle?
Okay, so we want to start having us, now that we've kind of talked about like what RJ and TJ are, how we're thinking about like where it isn't helpful. And like, in this, we're also hoping like we're also all thinking about where it is helpful for us, and so that's kind of where we're, again, bringing it back to our family and community circle building. So if folks need a minute to like maybe grab a pen, a piece of paper, something to write on, something to like think through this, or again, however you are thinking about visualizing or actualizing your circle during our time together. I learned this kind of style of building circles. I'm going to give 2 examples of how to build circles. And one of them was taught to me by some of my teachers in Boston in Unity Circles, and also Saida Pinto and Harold and Phil Gattensby from Restore Circles and the Tlingit Nation in the Yukon Territory. And so I'm also just, again, really wanting to bring in that remembrance. And again, that that value of roots and restorative justice, right? That we're all being able to really understand where these practices are coming from. That is, where you guys will be able to say where it came from, as I do. And so we always kind of start our planning and prepping of a circle with kind of these 3 main questions of our introduction, our purpose, and our space. So always thinking about like, how are you going to introduce a circle, and however that means to you, to the participants that you want to invite together. What does it mean for you to actually like sit down with a sib or with a parent or a caregiver, or a child, and say, you know, or a roommate, a partner, and say, I want to hold a circle. And how will you explain what a circle is as well? You know, for instance, you know, when I was explaining my family circle to my family the first time, I explained it as a really patient space for us to listen to each other one at a time with a talking object. That is all I gave about what circle was. And so that was for me a good way to also bring our family into what it meant, you know, to start actually thinking about having this harder conversation that we needed to have. So that was my introduction. My purpose for the circle, you know, and this is just me giving my example, was for us to talk about some of these things, in my family around the time that we had experienced some really serious loss, to actually sit down together as a family and talk about some of the loss we had experienced and how that changed a lot of the dynamics in our family. So that was our purpose. Our purpose was to talk about this loss. And then the space that we did it was honestly very important to us in the family and community circle, because we did it in our living room. We just sat in the living room, we turned off the TV, and we moved our couches so we could all kind of be in a circle-like type of structure. And that was our space for everyone to feel safe to share and listen. As you know, for us, like that was our grounding point, for the person who we lost at the time, who was our mother, and my mother. That was her favorite space in our house. And so that was a place where we wanted to convene and remember her and talk about how things might be different without her. And so that was kind of a way that we had begun to build that. So I want to invite everybody here to, you know, like, however you are thinking about this, to think about what are your introduction, your purpose, and the space that you want to invite people in, as you're building out your circle. And thanks, folks, for also just giving acknowledgements of the loss that I'm speaking of. I do really appreciate that, as like, you know, we are going to be, you know, thinking about these circles in beautiful and fun ways, but also to sometimes talk about things that can be harder and can be the things that maybe we've been sitting on for a while and haven't been able to talk about in our families. So I don't also want folks to feel like, because I'm talking about a really serious circle my family had, that you can't have a fun, silly, exciting, like dynamic circle with your family, and that those things are not like mutually exclusive. I don't know if we can go to the next slide. Also, Zara, if you have anything to add about how you have prepared building a family circle.
Yeah, definitely. So for those who know me, you know that I'm very abolish the nuclear family. I was a queer homeless teen, and so have just been building my village around me. So I define family expansively. And I was able to travel with some friends, one of whom is here tonight. And we had a number of conflicts over the time that we were traveling together. And when we got back, we decided we're each solo parents with kids, who are range in age from 6 to 9. And we decided we wanted to talk about everything. The conflicts were not so big that we even felt like we had already addressed the conflicts. We'd hung out, but we still were I was really excited about like doing Restorative Justice Circle after I had learned from Queen. And my friends were like, yes, let's do it. And so we organized a circle first for the adults, and then an intergenerational circle for the adults and the kids. Initially, I wanted to do an intergenerational one, and then one of the other adults said, let's break it up. And I'm really, really glad that we did that, because what ended up happening was the adults ended up having a much longer, a little deeper conversation. And really, it was sort of like bringing in the probiotics to our relationship. Again, we didn't really have much conflict at that time. It was just like, let's talk about what it was like to travel together. Let's talk about how we want to do this in the future, and give appreciations to each other. So it was really like nurturing our relationship. And then the next day, the circle with the kids was a little shorter. Initially, we were like, oh, we'll all paint this pumpkin together, and that will be our talking piece. Of course, then we had a wet painted pumpkin. So we couldn't use that as the talking piece, and we ended up using a pillow. But it was really lovely, and kids were able to share some appreciations of each other, some of the things that they wanted to go differently. They developed community norms. Some of the community norms were, I mean, you know, great ones that I think you see all the time, like one person, one mic. Others were more like make space for twerking. And we're like, okay, let's have a pro twerking circle.
Yes.
And I would say the one with the kids was a little bit shorter and a little bit less like, let's do this circle in this, because again, they're 6 to 9-year-olds and they didn't necessarily want to hear all of the things that the adults wanted to talk about. So again, I'm glad we did 2. But it was really valuable to have fun.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Zara. Thank you so much. I have heard about that family circle, and I am still just like amazed at just like all of the different dynamics y'all were able to hold in these 2 beautiful circles, and just the joy that comes from your face every time you talk about those 2 circles, that I think is just so evident of the intention and love that y'all put into it, and the twerking that y'all were able to put into it too. But I think that is, again, just, I know somebody in the chat had also brought up this, asked about like specifically thinking about circles and RJ and TJ practices with toddlers. And so I know we will definitely have like a more kiddie friendly circle template of how to build a circle with folks. Also love that Miriam just said, if you can't dance, it's not a revolution, like period. That's literally my ethos. And I love it. But we're definitely going to try to get to like how to kind of hold this with a couple of different kinds of, families and communities of a few different ages. And so these are just kind of the primers for folks to think about before we're actually getting to building your circle. So we kind of did like the groundings of like your purpose, your introduction, your space. And so then we kind of have these like, and Zara kind of talked a little bit about this, but your centerpiece and talking objects, and how these can be really, really helpful, again, of grounding different purposes and relationships in the circle. So the talking piece is something that you're going to pass around, and the circle is kind of that one mic value that Zara was just speaking about. So it's going to allow folks to really be able to listen and speak intentionally and not be speaking over each other. And it also is going to kind of help to equalize some of those power imbalances, which definitely helped in our circle, in my family circle. And I'm sure everybody in some ways can imagine what it is like trying to get a father to respect a talking piece, and, how that goes in a lot of ways. And so, we were playing around with it. And so our agreement was that he would bring something that would be our talking piece, so that it would also really ground him and being present in that space. And for your centerpiece is really the thing that's going to be in the middle of your circle, or somewhere kind of around the space to really ground you. And really thinking about the centerpiece that's connecting y'all, right, in materials or objects that will support you in your group and connecting to the larger purpose of the circle. So just to go back to my example, for our family circle, we had things like pictures of our mom, pictures of our family, pictures of ourselves that were kind of before, how like, kind of like before we kind of talk about, before like, what was it? Before a lot of the stuff that was happening in my family and my mom got very sick, we kind of wanted to use that as our anchor of the things that we were remembering, and memory was kind of our centerpiece in a lot of ways. So thinking again about like in your family community circles, what are the things that might ground y'all together in a shared purpose of being together? What are those visual representations might look like? And sometimes that might be like food, that might be, music, that might be a whole bunch of different things that can help you guys ground and be together in a shared purpose. So yeah, I want to go to the next slide. I definitely want to be mindful of our time. And I do know that there are things coming up in the chat. So I definitely want to kind of put some hold on that, and hopefully we can come back to some of those things. So I'm going to go over 2 circle templates that folks can use. This is kind of a little bit more of like the adults templates, and then we can get more to the template for younger folks. And so these are kind of like the main components of building a circle that I have been taught. Again, there are a lot of different ways that you can hold the circle. So this is just one way. And so we always kind of think about a grounding or an opening as a way to kind of open up the space. And that does not, have to, again, be anything super complicated, right? It could be a song that you play while you're coming in, a poem that you all like, some breathing exercises, a reading, or even like an activity. I know sometimes with young people, we love doing some movement as our grounding or our opening to kind of get those things moving. And then also like for us in our family circle, for me and my family circle, like we had, well, for us, my mom really loves Stevie Wonder. So we had Stevie Wonder playing in the house as our kind of grounding and opening of how we all came into the space together. And again, in that shared purpose and reminder of why we're here and who we are. And then we kind of move to our check-in questions. So once folks get settled, we've kind of all introduced ourselves, understood the purpose. We want to move towards a question that's going to help open everybody up to the circle discussion. And so that usually I don't recommend that being like, if the conflict like is about the family, like the check-in question shouldn't be like, what do you think the main problem in the family is right now, right? It should be something to kind of get folks opening up and practicing using that talking piece is usually what I like to think about it. So, simple check-in questions, allowing people to check in with their minds, their bodies, their heart, their spirit, in a bunch of different ways. I know one that is very common is like, what's your weather report, right? If your mood was a weather, how would you describe it right now, right? That can sometimes give people a little tell into how folks are coming into the space and being more mindful about that. And then we move to kind of like what I like to joke is like the meat of a circle, even though I think all parts of a circle are very important. I joke that this is like the meat. And so this is kind of like the main round activities, either questions or activities or different workshop types of exercises that are actually, connecting to the purpose of the circle. So then you might have some of those deeper questions, like for us, some of those questions were, what's been the hardest part about losing, mom? What's been the hardest part about losing this anchor in our family? What has felt supportive about us being together? What has felt hard about us being together? And usually, with questions, I think, being really intentional about how many questions you're asking and how many, you're trying to put out there so that folks are also really taking time to listen to each other. So, usually to start, I'm thinking like, 2 or 3 questions. And then as you guys get more comfortable and practice being in presence together in circle, really listening to each other and respecting that talking piece, then you can kind of like add more questions and add more dynamics to it. But that was how we did it. We kind of set it at like 2 questions and kind of allowed each of us, and it was 5 members of my family at the time, to really dig deep into what those questions were about, what it felt like to not have our mom there, what we needed now, and what felt good and what felt hard. So thinking about what are those main questions that might help connect everybody, or activities, right? Sometimes they can be movement, it can be a workshop, it could be really anything, right? A circle is really dynamic. And then as we're closing and our grounding, thinking about same thing with our opening, what's another kind of activity, song, poem, or breathwork reading that will invite everyone to reflect on their experience or support themselves as they leave the circle, right? Specifically for like heavier circles, we really want to be intentional about how we're asking people to leave and exit that space. And so again, for my family circle, we were really about trying to have this be like a memory space. So like, what's your favorite memory of people in this room, right? That was our checkout question. Like, what's your favorite memory of our family, right? Of the people who are in the room right now. And so we got to be able to talk about our road trips that our dad used to take us on, when he would just pack us up on a Saturday morning and just drive us somewhere to just, be outside. Cookouts that my family had. Those were the things that were really important for us. And it allowed also for some of us who had some like heavier feelings about that loss to also really be able to, again, connect what we had experienced during the loss of our mom, and that there was still this family that we were a part of that was still really connected and committed to being with each other. And so that was kind of like how I built that circle, was using this template. And again, I do have some, like, I joke that these are testimonials, but these are just like texts that my family has now sent me about how that circle went. So I want to be able to share some of those at the end, if we have time, about how my family have thought about that circle, because that circle has been almost now 4 years ago. So it's been a little bit of time. So maybe we can go to the next one and look at the kitty one. And so these are actually was created by a young person, Tay, who was actually an organizer with a Detroit restorative justice organization called YVAC. And they are really, really big about the 3 Bs when they talk about building circles, especially with like really, really young people. We think, like, I have seen this in practice, and I love the 3 Bs. And so it's the bread, the beets, and the brains. So what's the bread? What's the food that we're all convening around? You know, what are the things that we're doing together? You know, whether that's making a meal together, eating together, that kind of space for us. What are the beats? You know, what are the music that we're going to be playing together? What are the things that might open us up to discussion? And then, you know, what are the brains? What are like the main discussion points that we might want to have with each other? And so, you know, these are also just 2 template models that you can use. Neither one is like, you know, any better than the other. I've used both of these and I absolutely love them for different circles. And again, like, we're definitely wanting to like lean into creativity. So if you find like a mixture of both, please, like, you know, also share that with us. And as we kind of build these circles together, would definitely love to hear, you know, what's coming up for folks about how this is, you know, sitting in your family or community circle. And so
What can you do that's good?
what can I do? And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so we want to take some time to like really build out, you know, build on building our culture, bringing our culture to our circles. So also really thinking about how, like, some of the things that I mentioned that were so impactful for our circle at home was that we had really clear things about what our family was and how we brought those into the circle. So those were the things that for me was about bringing our culture, bringing who we are into this practice, rather than trying to like fit and mold my family into a practice or into like a framework of this practice that didn't really connect with them. I was trying to work backwards of what is actually going to bring them to the table. And so part of that was the food, you know, part of that was the beats. And, you know, also part of that was, again, like us really being intentional about like what things of our mom and our family and our culture do we want to bring into this space. That was like really helpful for us. So I invite everybody also to think about like, what are the cultural practices, things that are really important to your community, your family, the people that are important to you that you can bring into this circle, because those are going to be the things that really impact people. Yeah, I'm seeing some in the chat and I'm really excited to read some more of those. But I also want to give us some time. Zara, I want to do a time check of like, for folks to actually take some time to build those circles.
Yeah, I mean, we planned for 10 minutes. We're like 4 minutes behind. I don't know if we want to start with 6 minutes and then check in with folks, see how they're doing, and then okay, cool. So let's take 6 minutes to start building out your circle. Do you want to provide folks with instructions?
Yes. So I am going to put this copy of the templates in the chat. Also, I was thinking maybe we could have one of the other templates up on the screen so folks could have them up as they are. That one's good. And I'm gonna share the one, the more template-y one. I'm gonna share that one with everyone here. So just give me one moment, but having a moment to just think through that with everybody. Let me see.
No, I'll start playing some music. Take some time.
Okay,
You
cool.
can template that is on the screen and start thinking about how are you going to build your circle. And you can use the chat if you have questions throughout this process, and we can respond in the chat. And we'll also take more time to discuss afterwards. Sorry, I listen to my music on full volume.
Also, just quickly, I shared the other template in the chat.
Don't be afraid. After the darkness is light. Don't you be afraid. And it comes along night.
So I use music to keep time actually, and we're at about 6 minutes. And we're getting some really beautiful stories and questions in the chat. I loved what Christina shared. Realized we've been doing that with our littles, 1.5 and 5-year-old. We gather around a big bowl of popcorn at the end of our family meeting. Each person picks a song and we have a dance party. My son, 5-year-old, has really responded to the rosebud thorn format for the main portion. We've struggled with more targeted discussions around things that might not be working well in the family, though. And Luke shared, we have 2 young kids and do very simple circles with our fam. We draw quick pictures on a topic and add them to the center. Then ask questions like, what is something we are looking forward to? What's been the best part of your day? What's a way you show people you love them? Even what's your favorite thing to play right now and why? Love that. Love that. And then Meher asked, is reaching a resolve important, or is the process of TJ, RJ more important? Wonderful question. And I wonder about your answer, Queen. I definitely have some thoughts.
I think that is a great question. I'm kind of laughing, not because of the point of the question, but only because I think I struggle with this question. And I think I have asked Zara this a couple of times, quite honestly, too. But I think that, for me, I don't feel like we can put I feel like this is going to be most of our answers for RJ or TJ questions, or at least for me, is usually like, it depends. I think I have seen circles where reaching the resolve is the necessity for people, like for their safety or for their needs to be met. We need that resolution. But also I can't say that like processes that I've been in or been a part of that maybe didn't get to the result or resolution that it wanted, didn't also have a beautiful process that many people could take things from. So yeah, I'm giving you a both and type of answer because I can't really say for me that one is more important than the other in a complete, anytime circumstance. I think it really depends on what we're really hoping to get out of the circle. But yeah, I definitely want to pass it to you, Zara, and hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I agree completely. It really depends on the situation. Something I've been learning, and I think I was telling Queen recently, this is still a lesson in progress, but I used to really struggle with people pleasing. I used to really want resolution more than I wanted anything else, want the relationship more than I wanted anything else. And at times that meant I was compromising too much. And so it's really hard to know. And that's why it's so important to know what are your hard lines in the sand. What are the things you absolutely can't compromise? What are the boundaries you need to hold? And something I'm learning is sometimes a boundary is preserving the relationship. So I set a boundary with someone, maybe it was 2022, August of 2022. And in August of this year, they ended up writing me a long apology letter, sharing that they had really interrogated some of the dynamics that I was naming in our relationship. And we were able to debrief. And because I'm a weirdo, I was like, can we do a jam board and talk about what worked well and what didn't work well? This process that we had. And we did. And, something that I learned from that was that we both needed space. I needed healing. I needed time. And because I set the boundary early enough, there wasn't too much water under the bridge, that there wasn't that much hurt. And it had never gotten to a point where it was like something unforgivable had happened. So I set my boundary early, gave it a lot of space, a lot of time. They took a lot of that space and time. That one of the things they'd written was, you know, if like someone setting a boundary into this with me this way, this is a sign for me that I should be looking at this. And they struggled with defensiveness for the first few months. They sought validation, and I got to be on, on my jolly way. I wasn't there for any of that. And they, read some of the books that I had recommended, and we have a great friendship now. I mean, I won't say like we talk all the time, but we've gotten to support each other through a conflict or through developing conflict processes in our organizations. So it's like sometimes I think we could even think about the idea of resolve more expansively, because there's really nothing that takes the place of time. It's not going to be quick sometimes. Sometimes it could take years. Processes can take years. And I think something that Queen and I have tried to reiterate is, just taking the time, nurturing those relationships over time it all matters, and it's all preventative. It's the proactive care work that we're doing. I know there were also some questions in the chat earlier about really young kids. I love, Luke, that you shared what you do with very young kids. And I think when they're very, very little, sometimes it's just, how are we supporting them and creating and making sure they feel safe in sharing their experiences with us? Are we apologizing when we mess up? Are we demonstrating, modeling accountability to them? Are we giving them space and opportunity to give us feedback? So I think a lot of it when they're very little, especially as they're still developing language, is just listening. But I love some of the activities folks were sharing, the ways to use art and music and targeted questions. I used to do 2 truths and a lie to learn about my kids' day each day, and it was like, okay, how do we do this as a game? And it's a lot of promoting communication and modeling behaviors.
Y'all better write all that down. That was it right there. Like we could close that, but we could close after that. That was perfect. I also want to put that Marion in the chat also said that like the relationship is the goal and the point. And I think that also like was a beautiful connection to what you were talking about, Zara, of just like, again, our relationships, we might not always see what we're planting in the moment when we do this type of work, but later it can be a month, it can be 10 months, it could be 10 years. We see those things blooming and blossoming. And that is also a really beautiful thing about RJ and TJ, that one of my teachers told me a lot and still tells me, is that we're planters. Like we plant things and then we kind of got to leave it alone sometimes. We can't like be breathing on it, heavy on it, because it's not going to grow healthfully in that way. So just affirming that and what you said in the chat, Marian. And then I also think a lot of what I have been thinking a lot about with RJ and TJ for really youngins, is also being really, really intentional again about radical consent and what does it mean for a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old to really know that their body is theirs. I think is a really radical practice and a really radical thing to think about. So that's also like another offering, if that can help.
Ebony had a great question in the chat. Would you call the circle a facet of TJ or RJ or both / overlapping? I think I associate it more with RJ. And I think just like it can be, we can use it as a TJ practice. Because I think of, again, TJ so expansively that really, cooking for someone, so much can be TJ. A circle could fall under that umbrella. So I think of TJ as an umbrella term. And Rebecca shared in the chat, I'm struggling with how to bring folks into a circle when it's a new practice. This is so real. My family of origin and my partners struggled a lot with honesty and communication. I've been involved in a lot of TJ and RJ convos, but my partner hasn't. So bringing this to our family will be new and scary. Yes, sending a lot of care to you.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And I mean, at least in the role of like, none of my family even, knew about like restorative or transformative justice, even though I had been doing it for a couple of years when I had brought this to my family. They were like, oh yeah, that thing that Queen does, sometimes to like help people maybe not go to the police, but they didn't really know like what this practice was. And so I definitely think trying to have some more open conversations with my dad. But I think one of the big things for me that was very clear for us, and again, this is an offering, so I don't know, again, please take what you can and leave the rest. But for us, it was really like necessity. Like at that point, it was so important for us to do, you know, to do that, and kind of really also put like, for like offering it to my dad as like, this is something that we need, like this is something that your daughters need. And so like, we need you to show up in this way. Was also kind of a way we were able to kind of dig in a little bit more to that communication that we needed from him. I will not say that honesty was like any of these things were perfect in our circle. We did catch some of our family members in a couple lies in the circle, and we like had to address that later. So again, like I think really, as it was saying, of like showing up and really investing in the relationship. Like it really did take a while for my dad to even really embody these things, in terms of how he needed to interact with his daughters, and even the feedback we gave him in that circle. We had to be really like mindful that this wasn't something that somebody was just going to integrate in a day, especially not like a 49-year-old man. But for us, that was also thinking about what are the things that we can do to like support and also keep ourselves supported while we're like all trying to move through this, was a really big part of how we did that. So even just like having and being okay with that might be a process. The circle, getting to the circle itself might also be a process in which, you got to think about a little bit. How are you, again, bringing these things? And kind of as it said, right, and drawing on those cultural practices as Miriam is bringing back into the chat.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you touched upon honesty, because it definitely reminded me of my circle. One of our rules was sort of, we trust, each person's experience or each person's version, even if we have different ones. And I remember a certain 6-year-old that I will not be named, just saying things, and everybody was like, that's what happened. And I was like, I was facilitator, so I was like, remember our ground rules. If 6-year-old says there was a unicorn there, that unicorn was there as per 6-year-old. And people, so it's interesting. I feel like the biggest lesson I've learned is you're going to make mistakes, and it's going to be awkward, and it's not going to be perfect, and you just keep practicing, and it's just see how it goes, and there will be lessons learned from every process that you apply to the next process. So just beginning, it can be really powerful. And also, I will say, don't get discouraged if it doesn't work. Which is the first thing that my little one said to me when they went to school and tried to do a circle, which was, oh, we're not doing that again. Didn't work. And so I think it comes back to that great question about like, is it about the resolution or is it about the process? And you're always gonna learn something. And so I would say set achievable goals. Don't be so ambitious. Like, I want to heal my whole relationship with my mom that I've been estranged from for 10 years. That might not be an achievable goal for one process, but are there things you can agree to achieve together? Can you say, okay, at the end of this process, we're both going to do X, Y, and Z. So setting goals that feel good, and being willing to learn and make mistakes. Yeah, and everybody has to be about the fact that your young one attended Healing Circle at school. Exactly. It's about trying.
Yeah.
So we have a little under 15 minutes left. I know we had these questions for folks if we wanted to, I don't know if folks got to start thinking about what they wanted their circles to be like. But if so, and I know people have already been asking and we've already been answering questions, but what comes easily to you or came easily to you about building a family or community circle, and what parts are you struggling with?
Mm. I know Jessica also said one thing that helped our family was building circle practice around family check-ins and practicing now our kids call circles for celebration, rites of passage, etc. When they have something more deeper, they want to be in circle. Which again, so beautiful.
I love that. Yes, Jessica, it doesn't always have to be about conflict or harm. It could just be, this is how we.
Yes. Yes, celebration circles. And so, and also to say that circles are also like the space can also be really dynamic. Like, me and my sisters, I, jokingly call it a circle because we do a lot of the things of circle, but we're on FaceTime, right? And we all now live in different parts of the country. So we try to do this thing and it's never, addressing anything, usually anything too big. But it usually is just like a space for us to update on each other's lives, get the good hot gossip about what's happening on the other side of the coast with my sister, be able to just like continue to be connected with each other. And those check-ins that you were talking about, so related to that a lot, Jessica. I was feeling a lot of that in kind of these impromptu kind of sister circles that me and my sisters have been trying to do, like on Zoom or on FaceTime, to try to stay connected. I know folks definitely did talk about some of the things that were like hard for them or anything struggling with, but I definitely want to open more space if folks have like questions specifically about any aspects of the circles that maybe weren't as clear, or parts that you're still thinking about, that people even in the chat or in the larger group could give examples on how they built it. It's been great hearing like the main round activities that people have done, the check-in questions people have asked. Somebody before said that they use the rosebud thorn activity for their check-ins, and I love those. So I'd love for us also to share more of our practices together, and I think that'll be so beautiful.
Oh, yes. I love that. Using circles in sex worker community.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, let's bring it everywhere. I saw Katie shared one thing that was easy is we have a lot of creativity and culture in our household. One thing that was difficult was the topics and the actual speaking, like my dad saying, I have nothing to say. It's really challenging. And I think it always also comes back to how are we all doing our own individual work to be able to better communicate. It's challenging. And at what point do we accept that, maybe like there are certain topics we're not going to be able to touch on with someone. Maybe I sound a little bit more hopeful. I feel very hopeful about kids. I know, Queen, you have had so much success with elders.
Yes, so that's definitely where I'm thinking about. And I think for us, it was also like bringing in some of those cultural practices of like being able to like not feel that circle was so professionalized for me to be like, come on, Dad, like all your daughters are showing up. Can you like kind of asking him again, like, can you please share something? Like we were kind of breaking some of those structural circle molds, if you say, to really also like make sure that nobody felt left behind in that circle. So first, at one point, that was my little sister who like had less to say, and we like really tried to make sure that she had the talking piece for a minute and could just talk about whatever she wanted, even if it wasn't about the conflict. Because my youngest sister is like a lot more conflict averse than maybe some of her older sisters who just be going at it with our dad. And so we wanted to like give her the stage to just be able to talk and to say what's been on her mind, as also the youngest sister who lost her mom. And at that point she was really young. And so like we wanted to give her that space. And so I think for us, and I think someone said it in the chat earlier, that like mirroring and like practicing and showing up was one of the things that really did help my dad show up better um, in that space and share a little bit more. Giving him a way to also be able to like get thoughts down as they came up rather than like saying them immediately was also very helpful for him. So like we gave him a notepad, something to like write his thoughts down in the moment instead of like blurting them out, or like, you know, Zara was saying, like, that's not true. Like we were like, write it down, write it down and let it go. So that you could actually hear and listen to what, you know, your daughters were saying was really important to us. And that's not to say that like everything was perfect after the circle. Like we had more conflict and we had to come back to another circle that maybe like had a few less of us. And then it took like almost 2 years. And then my dad was finally like, oh, like maybe I want to do this again. Maybe this might be important for me to show up in again. Could we try doing this again with all of us together? And then like it took another 3 years for him to be like, oh, maybe I should try this with my brothers, and maybe we should do some of this and like talk about some of these things. And now he's starting to think about it in that way. But that is not to say that any of this like happened overnight. This is like at this point been kind of like a very intentional 6-7 year kind of process that me and my dad have had these really intentional conversations about what it means to show up differently. And the context was really different, right? Like I think there were things that changed in my family that my dad would not have been able to have these conversations in, you know, if these things hadn't happened in the same way. And so, you know, also like sometimes just having another person there to kind of be that checkness is helpful. Like I've had my dad had, you know, his brother sit in the circle with us one time, and my uncle is like one of the perfect people to just be like, come on, Chuck, you gotta, you know, and so having those people to also like make people feel more comfortable was really important to us. Offerings and rambling about what it was like being in that family circle with dad and uncle and folks in that room. But again, like I really feel like, especially with adults, especially with parents and elders, like really leaning into the patience that like you are a planter and you might not see the fruits of those things until a little bit later. But again, as Zara was also saying earlier, that should never be at the expense of your safety or your care of yourself. And so I just really want to make that very clear, that you should never be draining yourself or like hurting yourself to show up for your parents or your elders. And I also really do not believe in that. So I wanted to make that very clear.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Queen. I love the, we're planters. So many really amazing questions in the chat. One was about how to convert a circle to the one-on-one format. I think it really depends, but I don't know if folks saw our event, our Queenie's Crew event a few months ago on zine making. So with kids, I found zine making a really helpful tool for conflict transformation. So kids can draw what their experiences are, and you as an adult too can draw your experience. You can share with each other. And for my child and I, the zines, telling the story later is kind of hilarious. We really exaggerated each other's responses, but because we made the zines after kind of talking it through, apologies were said. So I think making time to process. Let's see. I saw a few comments about just how important it is to, and how, not normalized it is to have conversations about our feelings, about our conflicts. I relate deeply to Autumn's comment about, strong-willed neurodivergent kids. And it just a lot of different needs that we're always seeking to accommodate. But I also really, really liked what several of you were sharing. I can't find it anymore, but about, I think it was Chiara, about like circles as rituals, and it's something just, especially for folks who are just starting, maybe don't start with a conflict. You know, I had a little kind of informal circle at my birthday party where everybody went around and shared what they love about me. I loved that circle. So, you know, maybe start with a celebration, start with something light and see how that goes and work your way from there. It can be hard to dive into conflict without ever having done a circle. We have to nurture our relationships, nurture what we love about our relationships too. So I really love the rituals. I know we are wrapping up, and I know, Queen, you had some stories to share.
Yes. So with this, offering of talking a little bit more like really specifically about my family circle and like what that experience was like, like almost 4 or 5 years ago, doing that family circle. And so I asked my sisters and my dad to reflect on what it was like being in that circle then and what it's been like being there now. And so I wanted to read some of those so that you guys could also get like a real honest account of like how that felt for them and like where it's shown up. So my youngest sister, that's my Sid. She was saying that she was really nervous about the circle because she was worried that if it didn't end well, because she was the only one who was living with my dad at the time, that this would all fall on her to fix. And so she really appreciated that myself and our other sisters really took the time to reassure her and make sure that our dad understood some of those things that were worrying her before we went into the circle. And during the circle, at times, she felt like my dad was listening. She felt like he wasn't listening. And sometimes that really affected her ability to show up. But at the end, that she felt really good and felt like things would be different with him. Of course, there was another conflict that did happen kind of relatively after this. And so my sister was really frustrated about how she wished that he would have taken some of that feedback quicker than how he did in that moment. But that she wished that we also had more time to finish the circle, but she wouldn't have changed anything about it because she's glad that that was the first time in almost over a year since our mom passed that we all actually came together and talked. And so my oldest sister had some ideas and kind of more of, we kind of think of her as like the drill sergeant in a lot of ways. And so she was saying that she really liked the dynamic of the circle because the talking piece and how it gave an opportunity for everybody to talk one at a time and listen to each other, and that there was a shared goal that we were all working towards as a family. And so those were the things that were really helpful for her. And then my dad was saying that there were things about this that felt extremely emotional to him, that it was really beautiful for him to see all of his daughters again in one space after feeling like he had distanced himself from us for so long. And that this was a space to remember his partner who had passed, and that it still felt so real for him, and that it was feeling like a moment of actual connection with her back in that space that felt really palpable for him. He knows that there were some things that he did not fully embody from that circle. And so he in real time says that he wished that he would have taken more time to actually reflect and process how that circle went, rather than just jumping into that things were all fine. And so those were some of the things that my family had said about our circle, that my sisters had said, that my dad had said about where they had felt like we could have done things better, what they really liked about it, and also, what we all felt like could have been better. And so also, like I was holding that circle. And so like in other instances, I probably would not have told myself to hold that circle because I also wanted to share things. And so those is also some of the other things that I've been thinking a lot about is how are we also sharing facilitation of circles and who holds the circles in our family so that it doesn't always just feel like one person. And so that's been a really beautiful, intention that my dad has been trying to make, which is like, now he wants to learn how to hold circles and what it means to be in circle. And so now like that's where our conversations are coming up. So those are just some offerings. And I know, Zara, you talked a little bit about your circle already, but if there also are other things you want to share about it.
No, I don't think so. And I know it is 8 o'clock on the East Coast and kids
Right.
have bedtime, so we want to end on time. But first off, I just wanted to thank you all so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. I want to share our contact info if you have follow-up questions for us. The Queenie's Crew website. Queenie's Crew is sunsetting, for those who don't know, at the end of this year. Queenie's Crew has been a project of Project Nia. We have organized events and created resources to teach kids about prison abolition, if that's not how you ended up here. But you can still contact me at that email address, queeniescrew@gmail.com. You can contact Queen at Queen's email address listed on the screen as well. And as a follow-up, we are going to send out the recording. We're also going to send out some readings, some resources, so that you can keep learning about this topic. And definitely check out the Queenie's Crew website, where we have pod maps that kids can do and other resources to help kids start thinking about conflict and thinking about how to share their feelings and mapping in their communities who can support them. Yes, the website will still be up, even if we aren't continuing to do events. And here in Philly, Queen and I are going to organize another RJTJ at home session. So folks who are in Philly, you can keep learning with us. That'll be at Pentridge Garden on, what's the date?
It is December 9th, and that is on 50th and Pentridge. So we'll definitely send more out about that.
Yes. And thank you again so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate this. We hope y'all have a great night.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, so good to see you, Maria. So good to see you, Chantel.
Oh, so wonderful. I think I accidentally moved on the screen at some point. I can't make it go away. I don't know if other people see that. Did I do that?
No, it's been here on the screen the whole time. Bye. Thank you.
I must have done it in the beginning.
I didn't even see that. Oh my goodness.
Hilarious. Still learning.
Oh my God. We definitely got to save this chat.
I know. I think it does save. Oh, let me stop the recording.